Okay, now to design examples.
So one of the things that I do is I use a free software program called OneNote. And OneNote is a Microsoft, it's part of the Office suite, Microsoft Office, and OneNote is one particular suite within the system that is available free as a free download. And I find that the drawing tool is very useful. So when the instructions are sent out to my lab, what happens is the models are poured, and then I get a photo of my instructions and a picture of the model. And then we can use this to help us in our instructions for design. So we will draw. Now, here is an appliance that I want to create more sagittal space. I want more room for the 5s. I want to drive the 6s back a little bit further. And I want springs to help push those 5s into place. And I've added a little bit of composite as retention ledges so that the appliance, which isn't gripping anything at the front, has a bit of an extra retention. So what we do is we will say, okay, I'm going to draw the clasps first. So I'll use a black marker pen, and then I'm going to have a clasp on this 6-year-old molar. And I will allow space here for the solder and for my path of insertion. So I always draw my anchorage retention first. I figure out what teeth do I want to hold on to. Now I'm trying to create more space for the 5, so I'm going to have to hold the 4 and the 6 in order to have control over that space I want to develop. And I literally do this every time I finish with the patient. I open my email and I see, has Enrico sent me another set of instructions? I want some way of anchoring against the front so it doesn't fall out. And I draw my wire tags so that we don't lose control over the wire, because it can spin. We know that there'll be teeth erupting here, so we'll put a wire in anticipation in case it comes through in the wrong position. We know we want to push these teeth into a better position, so we're going to have a spring that allows us to do that. So that's my wire work. I've got my anchorage on the 6, I've got my anchorage clasp on the 4, I've got my wire that helps me align the tooth. I might extend that around so that I can create a little bit more space for the 3s, for example. All right, so I might adjust that wire to bring that rotated lateral out a little bit further. Now, where are we going to put the expansion screw? Well, I want to make more room here, so I'm going to put my screw here because I want a screw that can open out I'll engage that tooth with acrylic. I'll engage that tooth with acrylic. Engage that tooth with acrylic. And now I have the appliance connected. So I've got a wire that can push. I've got a screw that can drive and distalize the 6. I've got control of the front teeth. And here we are, an appliance. And literally it just takes this much time. You've got to think it through, of course. And then what we do at that point is we save this as a PDF and then we'll email that back. So again, if we are reopening space, we have to engage the teeth on either side of that space. This was already open previously. You can see this is where the premolar is erupting. This is inadequate space. So on this side, we're just going to put a spring. But on this side, I need a screw. We can see that we are probably going to need a little bit more expansion. So I might put a midline screw in as well, roughly along the same areas where the E would normally sit. We need a rest wire against this canine. We might want to bring that tooth in. So we have a wire that can spring that tooth into place. And then we need a wire that controls the position of the front teeth. Now we have to put the acrylic in. We have to make sure that we have the right amount of extension so that we don't have a floating appliance. So now we have an expansion appliance that has the capacity to deal with an ectopically erupting premolar, distalize a molar that's eaten up E-space, correct the alignment of an ectopically erupted lateral incisor, and control the form with sufficient retention so it all holds together. Now, a more conventional early treatment appliance would be the normal expanders that we use. So we like to clasp the second primary molars, the E's, making sure that we have sufficient spacing for the solder. All the decisions are based on assessing the radiographs to see how much life there is left on the E's. We need retention, but we also need resistance for rock. So whenever you have your partial denture design hat on, you know you have to have resistance form and retention form. So we have rests that sit on the canines and rests that sits on the first permanent molars. So that stops the plate from rocking back and forth. We want to align the teeth and to change the dimensions. So we have a wire that has the capacity to alter the form. So think of these wires as you would think of an arch wire in lingual braces. We would then want our expansion screw. Usually sits roughly in line with the E's or the second premolars. We have acrylic that sits high against the primary teeth and just avoids the first permanent molars. And we do that to avoid tipping of those molars. If you expand at the semi-rapid expansion, which we'll talk about in more detail, which is approximately 1 millimeter every 8 to 10 days, if you don't touch the 6-year-old molars, you won't tip them. Because the upper jaw expands at 3 times the rate of the lower jaw, we build in a little shelf to allow for the transitional Brody bite, scissors bite. All right, so that's the upper appliance. With the lower appliance, we do the same. We clasp the second primary molars. We clasp ideally a middle tooth. Can be a 6 if there's a 7, can be a 5 if it's a permanent dentition. We draw in the space so that the technician doesn't forget to leave us our space. We have our resistance form with a rest on the canine, a rest on the canine, and a rest on the last tooth. We want to be able to align these teeth, so we have a wire that sits on either side. We add in a little bit of extra wire to allow for the fact that the appliance will expand a lot. We put a screw above any frenums in the midline, and we connect it all together with acrylic. And we hug every area that we want to expand, because the only areas that expand are the areas that are touched by the acrylic. Because there's no suture in the lower arch, So it's all pressure induced. And that's the lower Wong widget.